Welcome back to another episode of the Wanderlust Wealth Show. And this is going to be part 4 of how to buy your first or next house hack investment property. And this is the last part of the 4-part series, y'all. So if you haven't already listened to part 1, 2, and 3, go back and listen to those first because it's going to be so much more useful and you'll be able to follow sequentially how the entire process actually goes. I literally go through the whole thing. But so now in part 4, what we're going to be talking about today is the last part of what it actually takes to buy that first investment property is the operation. But now this is part 4. And today we are going to talk about the last part of buying your first house hack investment property. Because here's the thing. So many people get to the point where they actually purchase the property. They've got it under contract. They closed on it. Amazing. And then it's like, okay, you actually have to run this thing. You have to run it because you're probably going to be holding onto the property for 2, 5, 10, 15, maybe 30 years, maybe even more than that. Most of my properties, I automatically run them as a 10-year hold. That's like my plan with most of them, just because it's really hard to lose out if you're holding a property for 10 years. So that also means that you have to run and operate that property for those 10 years, okay? So there's still work to be done. And so property management is what we're going to be going over today. It's the operations of the entire process. Now, there is a reason why there are a lot of property managers out there, folks. And there's a reason why they also make a crap ton of money. And trust me, they deserve it. Property management can be a pain in the behind. I still actually self-manage all of my properties. I just have systems and processes in place to make it so much more streamlined, so much less of a headache. And I've got people working for me that kind of take a lot of that stress out for me. Now, we are going to go over the 3 different strategies. So LTR, STR, and MTR. Long-term rental, short-term rental, and medium-term rental. Now, we went over all of these in part 3, so I'm not going to dig into what each of these is. So make sure you go and listen to part 3 of this podcast series so that you can understand a little better what is the difference between each of them. But just from an operations standpoint as well, there's a different approach. Okay, so let's start with the easiest, which is long-term rentals. Now, with long-term rentals, we already went through the screening process in part 3, and I said you could use a system called Avail, a software called Avail. And for the screening, you can actually have the tenant pay for the screening. Some people will pay for the screening themselves. I have the tenant pay because it shows me that they're serious about getting the property and they're not just like looky-loos and going to back out of their contract, you know? Okay, so now once you have a tenant secured, you need to send them a leasing agreement. And you can actually do that through Avail. You can make it through Avail. They'll pre-create or pre-populate a whole template for you, which is really awesome. So you don't even have to go out there and figure it out yourself. Some people also have used like Zillow rental agreements. All of these are totally fine. You don't need anything super crazy. But you're going to fill those out and then you're going to sign it, and so will your new tenants. Then you're going to need to actually have them send you their deposit. So for long-term rentals, I usually do a full month's worth of rent for your deposit, and it's fully refundable. So if they leave the property and it looks great, they get their deposit back, no problem. If there are major issues like there's a hole in the wall or the shower is fully broken or something crazy, right? Then that's when I'm going to take their deposit from them if I have to do any major like renovations or fixes to the property when they move out. Now, with long-term tenants, you can actually put utilities on the tenant. So electricity, water, internet, stuff like that. The tenants can actually pay for that. You don't have to pay for that out of pocket if you're able to separate it out. Now, this is something to think about whenever you are doing a multifamily property. So for example, my first duplex that I got in New Orleans, they have separate, each of the units have separate electrical meters. So I would have each of the tenants, if I wanted to do long-term tenants in each, they would have to cover their electricity. However, it is a shared water meter. So what I would actually do is budget that into the rent and cover that myself. So just think about that whenever you are buying a property. If it is a multifamily, if it's a single family, you may have to actually come out of pocket for all of that. So you just want to make sure that you're running your numbers accordingly. For example, here in my Denver house, it's a single family home, meaning that even though there are technically 2 separate units, right? Like there's that basement unit and this upper unit, I am having to cover the costs of all the units all as one because it's not separated out. But remember, you can include that in your monthly rate. Just make sure it's still within the market rate for rent. For medium-term rentals, though, and short-term rentals, it's going to be way more common for you to cover all of the expenses. Like, you're not going to have your Airbnb guests pay for your electricity. You know what I mean? Imagine if a hotel was like, actually, here's an extra $50 for your electricity that you used over the last 3 days. Like, no, you're not going to do that, right? So once again, just keep that in mind and bake that into your numbers whenever you are running numbers for a short-term rental or a medium-term rental. Now, for both LTR, so long-term rentals and midterm rentals, if your midterm rental did not come through Airbnb, I would also screen them in Avail too and do a whole lease, the same thing that you would do for an LTR. So you're literally taking the exact same processes that you'd use for an LTR and instead just also use that for an MTR. I recently had to do this with one of my properties in New Orleans, my personal unit that I don't live in anymore. Obviously, I got a longer term tenant. It was actually a midterm tenant, so it was 12 months, but midterm, which is honestly the best kind. But with her, we actually did a whole full lease in Avail and we're taking rent payments through there. But yeah, the reason I love Avail is you can accept deposits, you can set up monthly rent payments, and you want to do that. You don't want them to be sending it to you on Venmo or something like that. You want to be getting it automatically in your bank account so you know when you're getting it and you don't have to worry about chasing down your tenants because they haven't paid you rent for the month. Okay? Let's make it easy on everyone. They can literally set up a direct deposit, ACH, don't have to think about it. So note that with long-term tenants, you're most likely going to get the most questions at the beginning whenever they move in. Obviously, they're going to have questions about something whenever you're entering somewhere new. You're generally trying to figure the place out, see where everything is. You know what I mean. However, after that, you don't really need any other property management systems, honestly. Just make sure that you always have a handyman available that's able to come fix something. I'd really recommend if you can get someone who can come same day, that is ideal, or at least within 24 hours to fix any major things that happen at the property. And then in terms of communication, you can either have them reach out to you by text or by email. Those two are usually the easiest. I always like to put all formal communication within an email, but then whenever it's just small things here and there, then I'll just do it over text. But if it's something about the lease ending or the lease starting or anything like that, do it over email. Make sure you have documentation of every major form of communication. Now, it is so important that you actually be a good landlord, okay? Don't be a crappy landlord. Don't be a slumlord. Literally, remember that there are people actually real human beings staying in your property. Okay, so be a good landlord. Right? Let's give landlords a good name again. So make sure you actually fix things that are a concern, okay? If it's something that the tenant did, tenant has to fix it, right? But if it's something that property age, wear and tear or something crapped out, the AC went out, something like that, put some effort in and just get it fixed. You don't have to be the one going there doing stuff. Get someone else to come, okay? Treat your tenants the way that you would wish to be treated. But overall, with long-term renters, not much else happens. Same thing with the MTRs. After a while, they're good, you're good. There's not much more to worry about. Okay, so do I have something exciting happening for you? So if you have been trying to get into real estate investing, but you find yourself stuck in analysis paralysis, maybe you just don't know where to start or what your next steps are, this event is going to be for you. Now, I do not do this often, but I am going to be hosting a free, and I mean 100% absolutely free, live masterclass on September 17th on how you, yes, you can get started investing in real estate by the end of 2024. Because y'all, we are already halfway through the year, people, okay? Approaching Q4 at this point, and there is so much time for you to make this real estate investing goal of yours a reality. I also think this is going to be my last free masterclass of the year. So this is going to be the last opportunity that you will have to come and learn from me live and get all of your questions answered by yours truly. Now it is time for you to get into the room with people doing exactly the thing that you want to do. So if you want to come to this completely free live event, DM me the word freedom on Instagram or click the link in the show notes to sign up there. And I will see you there. I'm so freaking stoked. Now let's dive back into the show. But yeah, overall, not really much else happens. Once you have your LTR or MTR, they're in there for a while. And not much really needs to happen until you find your next tenant or until you need to find your next tenant. And sometimes they'll extend. So always ask your current tenants if they want to extend before going out and looking for another tenant. And I would really highly recommend that in your lease, you state that your tenants have to give you at least 30 days notice if they want to vacate. I actually always say at least 2 months just because that gives you enough time to find a new tenant. Okay. So give yourself time. Trust me, you're going to wish you had more time than not. Now, let's get into STRs. So short-term rentals are obviously a lot more work just because you do have people coming in and out of the property every few days. Like sometimes every day. If it's a one-day booking, it could be one day, next day, next day, next day. And so, you know how, like I said, with an MTR and an LTR, where the time when people are just moving in, that is the time where you're going to get the most amount of questions and from the tenants and stuff like that. It's going to be at the beginning. Well, so this happens every few days with short-term rentals. That's why it's extremely important that you have a robust messaging system and guidebook, because you want to be able to address all of these issues, all of these concerns, all of these questions as soon as possible before people even have them, right? And you want to be able to guide them to where the answers are so they're not constantly asking you like, oh, where's this? Or how do I do this? Or la, 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 la. You want to have all of that documented and addressed upfront. Now, I have a whole automated messaging template because I have at least 7 different messages that are being sent out to every single guest, including check-in, check-out, during their booking, asking for reviews, all of these different things. I actually have a whole YouTube video about guest messaging, so feel free to head over to my YouTube and I literally list out each of the different messages that I send out. But this is so incredibly important because most people have the same questions over and over again. Like everyone has the exact same questions. You also want to make sure that they know how to get into the house, how to lock it up, and whatever the house rules are actually going to be. Also, what are some quirks about the property? Are there some local attractions or restaurants that you would recommend? Which is why we give them the guidebook. That also goes through all of that. And this saves you just a ton of time repeating yourself over and over and over again to guests. Now, for all of your properties, but in particular for short-term rentals and midterm rentals, you are nothing without your cleaner. You need a good, reliable cleaner. That is literally your lifeline for your property. But it will literally make or break you, especially for MTRs and STRs, because you're valued based on reviews from guests. And cleanliness is a really, really, really big one if you want to make sure that you're still getting 5-star reviews. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm kind of distracted because I have folks outside who are hauling away all of my boxes whenever you're setting up an STR. And, this kind of relates to part 3 of the series is something you got to figure out is trash hauling, because you're going to have so many boxes from Amazon, from Wayfair, from wherever you're buying things from, and you need to be able to get rid of them. And just an FYI, it's actually pretty costly. So you can either rent a U-Haul yourself and take all the trash out, or you can just hire people. I hired people because I don't have time to rent a U-Haul. I also have packages coming every single day. So this is something, and this is where we go back to part 3, where I was make sure you've got everything planned out so everything can ideally come at the same time and you can have that trash hauled away all at once. And I have a ton of trash being hauled away all at once right now. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. Cleaner, so important. Your cleaner also kind of acts as your property manager to an extent, because they're in and out of the property every few days. They're seeing what's clean, what's not clean, what's broken, what's not broken, all of that. So they're going to keep you in the know about your property. And you can start to give them more responsibility. For example, our cleaners have debit cards. They have their own debit cards that are connected to our bank accounts. And I like to use Relay Bank. And I actually have a whole podcast episode coming out later this month about Relay Bank and how awesome they are for businesses, especially for real estate businesses. But they're able to go out there, buy supplies, buy whatever is needed in order to fix the situation. But you also want to connect them to your property management system. I know some people whose cleaners actually do all of the guest messaging too. Now, I use Turno to do all of my cleaner communication, all that stuff. But then I use Hospitable for my guest messaging and to sync all of my bookings. So both of these tools are so important. And I actually have another YouTube video that talks about these different tools and what you need to use, what you should get. So make sure you go check that out on YouTube. It goes all over it. And in WWA, you get all of these templates on like how to find a cleaner, how to manage your cleaner, what guest messages you need to send out, exactly the exact copy so you can go in and plug and play that for yourself. You get like links to guidebooks that I've created so that you can literally just go in and change it up for yourself. So all of my students in the WWA coaching program, they get access to all of that. Now, as I said, a good cleaner is necessary, but you also want to make sure that you have a good handyman. And this is regardless of what strategy you're doing. If you're doing STR, LTR, MTR, I know I've kind of mentioned the handyman a little bit before when we were talking about LTRs. Now, here's something people always forget about. All properties have monthly, quarterly, or yearly maintenance that you need to stay on top of, like AC maintenance, furnace maintenance, changing out air filters, pest control, water filter changes. So make sure you actually schedule these into your schedule because you want to make sure that the property is staying in tip-top shape and condition. And the people that hate real estate investing are usually the ones who just end up leaving their properties go and they don't take care of it and they essentially become a slumlord and their property becomes a nuisance. Now, I know that since you're house hacking, it's easy to want to do absolutely everything yourself. You're like, I can do the cleaning or I can do the fixing of all of it. And for a little bit, that's totally okay. If you want to, go for it. But when I purchased my first place, I set it up right away, just knowing that I will never again really be there. Like, I am not going to be the one fixing stuff. I'm not going to be the one cleaning the property. I'm not going to be changing out the light or air filters. I'm going to be hiring someone who's going to do that. And it's so awesome because literally like the income that my cleaners have gotten from me paying them to clean the property, that's helping them pay for their child's education, right? Like, you want to hire people to help stimulate the economy. So yeah, I always say set up your systems for your property as if you live 800 miles away or in a completely different continent, because that's the thing. You really can manage these from anywhere in the world with the right processes and systems. Okay, so that is part 4 of this series. That is the whole series of how to actually buy and get your first house hack investment property or your next house hack investment property. I hope that this was super useful and helpful for you. I just kind of like spurted out as much knowledge as I could in these bite-sized episodes. And don't forget, I am going to be hosting a free live masterclass on September 17th. So make sure that you come out to it, show up, get all your questions answered. I want to make sure that more of you are buying properties, getting started investing in real estate here in 2024 because there's so much opportunity out there right now for you. Yes, you to get started investing in real estate. Okay, see ya. Bye, fam. Thank you so much for listening to Wanderlust Wealth Show. Now, don't forget to follow the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you love this episode, it would literally mean the world to me if you shared this with a friend or a family member or literally like anyone off of the street. Like right now, go ahead, share it so you don't forget, or post it on social media and make sure to tag me. I love seeing what you're listening in on and what you resonated with, and I'm just so freaking thankful for you. I'm so freaking excited for you. I love you, and don't forget, life really doesn't have to be hard.